Coming. It's nice to be here. I suspect that there are malaria experts, real malaria experts among us tonight. I see some familiar faces. How many people here have actually had malaria? Just raise your hand. Scattering. 4 or 5. Okay. Well, congratulations for surviving. Coming. It's nice to be here. I suspect that there are malaria experts, real malaria experts among us tonight. I see some familiar faces. How many people here have actually had malaria? Just raise your hand. Scattering. 4 or 5. Okay. Well, congratulations for surviving. I myself have never had malaria, but I am fascinated by this disease for many different reasons, and I'll try to explain them to you. For one, it's really, really old. And that fascinates me. We've had malaria probably since we evolved as Homo sapiens. We know there's malarias in all different kinds of creatures that we've co-evolved. I myself have never had malaria, but I am fascinated by this disease for many different reasons, and I'll try to explain them to you. For one, it's really, really old. And that fascinates me. We've had malaria probably since we evolved as Homo sapiens. We know there's malarias in all different kinds of creatures that we've co-evolved with this parasite. There's malarias in our ancestors, like great apes and chimps and monkeys. There's also malarias in birds and lizards and mice and rabbits, and all kinds of creatures have their own malarias. So it's a hugely successful creature, this little parasite that causes this amazing disease. So that really fascinates me. It's also shaped our settlement patterns. Lots of our history has been shaped by this disease. Our bodies themselves, 1 out of 14 people alive today have genetic mutations in their DNA that first arose in reaction to malaria, into the fight against malaria. And these are mostly deformities of our red blood cells. So it's really shaped our bodies and our histories in this very striking way. There's also this kind of impatience that I found as a journalist writing about public health and medicine, where, there's this idea like, well, we've known about the HIV virus since 1983, and we still have no vaccine. And it's a travesty, and it is a travesty. I'm not saying it's not. We have these new diseases like SARS and avian flu and swine flu, and why don't we have drugs? We need to have drugs that treat these things like right away. We have this expectation. And I think that's fine, that's good, but then you look at a disease like malaria and it's like, well, God, we've had this for millennia. We've known how to treat it really well for at least a few hundred years. I mean, we discovered the first drug that works against malaria in the 1600s. That was 400 years ago. We know how to prevent the disease. It was a British Army surgeon in India who figured out that mosquitoes actually transmit the disease into birds. And it was later an Italian zoologist that same year who figured out that these parasites are carried by mosquitoes into people too. So we've known at least since then that you can avoid this disease completely if you just avoid the bites of infected mosquitoes. Nevertheless, all these years have passed, and we have effective treatment, we have effective prevention. 300 million people will get sick with malaria this year. Nearly 1 million will die. So that's an incredible thing. So that's really what I wanted to try to answer in this book, is why do we still have so much of this disease? What is it about this little creature that has made it so incredibly successful? There's also another great statistic, which is, malaria statistics. Oh, excuse me. Malaria statistics are notoriously kind of soft, but there is a statistic I like, which is that half of all human deaths since the Stone Age have been due to malaria. And it just gives a sense of how much, what a great toll this parasite has had on our bodies and our history. I also have kind of a personal connection to this topic, and I read a little bit about it in the book, but I thought I'd share a little bit more with you tonight. As a kid, my parents used to send me back to India to stay with my cousins and my grandparents in Bombay. I grew up here actually in Connecticut. And my dad's family actually lived in this tenement building in a slum in Bombay. And living there was just, it was just such a huge contrast to see the poverty, not just of my cousins. And, you know, we lived in this 2-room flat with a common bathroom down the hall. We had a courtyard down the middle where everyone used to just throw all their garbage. So there's lots of filth, lots of disease. Still very vibrant place. I remember very warmly. But what used to strike me is standing out on the terrace, which is what I used to do every evening. You know, I'd have my dinner underneath a ceiling fan, and then I'd go sit out on the terrace, just watching life kind of passing by on this busy street. There's cows, there's people, there's buses, there's motorcycles, and there's people who are living their lives out on the street there. And a little kid, a little boy around my age, he'd be having his dinner too. You know, I had just finished my dinner under the ceiling fan, this nice dinner, and then I'd go out on the terrace and I'd see the little boy on the street with the grime and the buses, and he was having his dinner.